information. Which one do you want to believe? Now, in my mind, FTP is exactly the same situation. What are we trying to get? Well, I'm not going to go through the whole definition of FTP. And out of interest, this morning I thought, well, I'm going to just check what do Training Peaks tell me about FTP, because Training Peaks, Zwift, who else? Full Gas, Trainer Road, all of these guys are using FTP as a marker of your fitness. According to Training Peaks at the moment, there's 5 different methods of determining your FTP. None of them involves doing a 20-minute test. So we've got to start questioning what are we trying to measure. So really what I wanted to think about today, I've actually got about 2 hours worth of presentation, but I'm just going to condense this to about 5 minutes, and then maybe David and I have a couple of questions and answers and then throw it out to you guys as well. Is actually thinking about using power with your training and the value of that. And what I try and get everyone to think about is themselves as an athlete. My laser pointer just about works on here. So think about you, the athlete. What are you trying to achieve? And really, what event are you trying to do? Now, competing in that event depends on how well you train. How well you train depends on how good your nutrition is, how good your competition is, depends on the training and so on. We've got a massive great circle out here that we've got to get right if you're going to get that competition right. Now, it doesn't matter to me whether that competition is a full-on sports heat in the mountains, whether it's a local crit race, whether it's a 10-mile time trial, or whether it's a Zwift race. It's that competition that matters. And how we train for that is really the underpinning. Now, you know, around the room there's probably 30, 40 people here. We're all different shapes, different sizes. We're all, in my mind, going to need different training plans and training programs. And again, I like to use this example of the Formula 1 car, and I'm just going to zip straight into this and say, right, there are so many factors that affect this car's performance. And, you know, starting off with the engine size, type, and, you know, and tuning of that. The problem that I've got, and it goes back to my Benidorm photo, is what picture in mind you have. If you're using functional threshold power to determine your training, we've got no idea about where your peak is, and we've got no idea about where your base is and where your endurance and efficiency is. So what we've got is we've got one data point that's predicting everything that you should be doing in your training. Now, to me, that's missing a large part of the picture. So whilst it's really good, it can be really useful to actually mark changes in your training and changes in your performance, for me, that sole data point isn't quite sufficient. Just as I'm about to grab David, he's done a runner, so I'll try and see if I can flip and look at a few more slides. Well, why do we use heart rate? Why do we use power output? Well, the pros do. You know, classic, this is 2011 Radio Shack, we've got an SRM, and we've got a polar. So we've got power, we've got heart rate. And just because the pros do it doesn't mean it's right. Doesn't mean it's right for everybody else. But it's about, for my mind, you guys understanding your priorities. You know, and I'm not going to embarrass people around here, but it's one of those, well, how much did your bike cost you type situation. Right, okay, yeah. And I've spent an extra £1,000 on my bike to get my bike an extra half a kilo lighter. But actually, you know, I'm stood here today, and I'm 2 stone heavier than I was a year ago. And I'd still say I'm reasonably lean, but a year ago I was, you know, racing a world championship race, age group triathlon, so I was 2 stone lighter and I needed to be. Now, my bike weight makes absolutely no difference. There's no ways that I could get my bike 13 kilos lighter than it is at the moment, and yet my body weight was. So we're looking at getting these priorities right. Again, having that single data point doesn't help us with understanding those priorities. And we've got to think about training, and I'm really going to zip through all of these now, and I just want to come on to a couple of little bits at the end. I'm going to talk about training. Really, this is about riding smarter and not harder. It's not about going out training to develop your FTP, it's about using your FTP to develop your training. But it's about knowing about some other values. And really, you know, your heart rate monitor, your power meter, it should be about ensuring a sufficient training load, and from that training load, about getting feedback during your performance. And then the thing that we really should be using a combination of heart rate and power for is looking at an early warning system for illness, overtraining, hydration, and nutritional status. And I know Tim is going to talk later on, particularly about the hydration and nutritional status. But we can all run into problems, and I think at the moment, I just want you to realise that whilst FTP is a good marker of where you are and where your fitness is, it shouldn't necessarily be the single data point that you set your training with. David, do you want to come and sort of throw a few questions at me, or see if these guys have got any questions? I've tried to keep it as brief as possible, I know.
So just to, Garry as well, just to give a bit of context where Garry comes from as well. Garry tests a lot of elite level athletes. So people you won't even know would be tested because of the non-disclosure agreements. Probably they don't want the name about that they're being tested and what the data is. So the sort of testing Garry does, you can see the rig over there, gets a good idea of all the different sorts of stuff that can be done, and it's obviously available to you, obviously because he's given up his time today.
I know we've got Scotty the Squirrel, but if we've got anyone that wants to be a guinea pig, I'm quite happy for a guinea pig to jump on and have a ride and do a bit of a max test.
Squirrel sounds good. Yeah, you can get the Zaga approval as well, so you can actually do a test that proves that you can have more than 5 watts a kilogram for an hour, which is amazing, isn't it? So, yeah, so the question I was going to ask you, so you've got this FTP thing, and also so on Zwift, you can now race, if you wanted to, several times a day, every day for a whole week, and all around the year. So we used to have a periodized year, didn't we, where we would take it easy in the winter. So the question I've got for you then is, just let's say that people are actually taking it easy, they're going to race on Zwift 2-3 times a week, maybe more. What is the potential impact of people doing that through a whole of the year?
That's the easiest question you've ever flummoxed me with. Clearly, the problem is if someone's constantly looking to race 4 times through the year, even if it's once or twice a week, it's pretty quickly, I'd say, you're going to get stale. 6 to 8 weeks worth, and you're going to find the performances aren't improving anymore. The chances are then you're also going to become very, very ill pretty quickly. Tim and I were having exactly the same discussion about 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago. And it's amazing that you can train yourself fit and you'll get fairly sharp in 6 to 8 weeks, but after that your aerobic base fitness will just continually drop and continually drop. And what you'll then struggle to do is you'll actually struggle to even perform at the level that you were previously. So there's a danger to getting too much into racing all the time. And I think Zwift is absolutely brilliant for some structured training sessions, some group rides, for keeping some enjoyment where maybe the weather means you can't get outside. But I think the danger is people can end up over racing. And actually when it comes to the race season, when you should be racing, you're fried from doing all the wrong stuff through the winter.
Okay. Any questions for Garry? So anything specific to them?
I'll go and hide in the corner, so if you don't want to broadcast your questions, come and have a chat and say, we've got a guinea pig or two, I might even stick this man on the bike and make him do some work in his jeans and his trainers.
Skin suit with me.
Good stuff.
So what, if it's not FTP then, what should people be training for?
Well, FTP gives you a good marker of fitness progression, but it's about knowing the whole fitness profile, and it's, as I say, it's like time-lapse photography. If you've just got a picture of the sun at midday every single day, the sun's up there. It's always up there. And we've got no idea of the sun going down, the sun, where the shadows fall, the strengths and weaknesses. And that's the problem with FTP. Is that for me, your functional threshold power is a good marker of a 10-mile and potentially a 25-mile time trial. It doesn't tell you how well you can sprint, it doesn't tell you about anaerobic tolerance. And the nightmare that I see, and I see people that, I work in central London quite a lot as well, and the athletes down there do what I call commuter racing. It might not be a race, but they've got to get from A to B to work, and so every set of traffic lights they're sprinting for, there's someone else on a bike up the road who want to be faster than them, and they literally will spend their 20-30 minute commute, attack, recover, attack, recover, attack, recover, and they've got a great anaerobic tolerance and a great top end. Put them on a test like this, their metabolic efficiency, their ability to keep going, their ability to burn fat as a fuel is absolutely abysmal. And so if you try and then put them in an event that's maybe more than an hour and a half, certainly 2 hours long, they get the first hour and a half, they're absolutely phenomenal, and then bang, their performance level falls off.
So another question for you then, so fasting.
Yep.
So big thing at the moment about fasting training. So how long can you ride for fasting before you need probably
Well, I think we put this one to Tim, but how long can I ride for before I ride fasting? I've been known to do 5 hour rides fasted on water only. on an infrequent basis, but that wouldn't be recommended. But, you know, again, the problem is people will get hold of the concept, oh, fasted training, that's great, it's brilliant for endurance, it's brilliant for promoting weight loss. Every single sessions will come fasted, and they end up getting run down. So it's putting the right piece of training in the right place. And this is, again, comes back to, you know, if we're talking about FTP, it comes back to putting everything in context. FTP is a great number, but I wouldn't set my stall by it. It's a useful marker that shows me my training progression, whereas what people end up doing is people end up going the opposite way around and saying, I am training to improve my FTP. By improving your FTP, it doesn't mean you're going to go faster in a race. It means your FTP is higher. It doesn't mean that your overall ability is any better.
So what about then another one FTP? So if somebody tests themselves, gets their FTP and measured at, let's say, 300 watts,
Yeah.
how would you expect that to change during a 12-month cycle?
Oh, well, it can change massively during the 12-month cycle, and you know the problem is everybody's different. Everybody's going to change differently according to how that person trains. So having an arbitrary value of my FTP is 300 watts means absolutely nothing, because it's hour to weight at FTP, it's anaerobic tolerance above that, it's aerobic base below that. It's all of these factors that will play in to that hierarchy of training. And I could probably flick back to one of the slides you can just about see on the TV screen over there. We'd look at a whole metabolic profile, how much fat burn is going on, how efficient the athlete is, what your threshold power output is, and what your anaerobic tolerance is. And knowing those strengths and weaknesses is then how you change your training, knowing what your target races are in mind. So there's no point in training in isolation and training to improve an FTP. It's, I've got X event that I'm looking to perform in. And, you know, as I say, whether it's a sportive, whether it's a road race, whether it's a crit, whether it's a mountain bike race, you know, you start to look at a time in the calendar that you build your training towards, rather than just trying, I've got to try and improve this arbitrary number. Well, what's the value of that? It's fun, it's interesting, but you can't sustain it. And the majority of the training that you would do to try and boost your FTP, after about 6 to 8 weeks of that, you will become stale and you will struggle to improve your performance anymore. So you need to start thinking about periodized training again, which comes back to this problem of racing throughout the winter on Zwift to try and boost your summer fitness. You're going to struggle to be able to do that on a consistent and consecutive basis.
Last question for you then
Yep.
is, forgetting periodization, if we were going to make it really simple for somebody who just wants to do a 1-week plan that was going to keep them relatively fit, and they were going to use something like Zwift, so they're going to do an hour on average for each session, what would that week look like?
Depends where we are in the year. And again, it does. It depends on what that person is trying to achieve. So, you know, again, I think there's a copy. So I was going to say, there's a copy of my book over there, and a typical winter season is, you know. So I'd probably say if we're doing anything from 4 to 12 hours a week, typically Tuesday, Thursday, steady endurance ride, you know, 2-3 watts per kilo, depending on the level of the athlete, anything from 45 minutes to 2 hours. One interval session midweek just to keep things mixed up. Steady endurance ride at the weekend, again, hour and a half, 2 hours, and then a long, easy route ride, social ride, you know, 4 to 6 hours. That would be a typical week for the winter. Whereas in the summer, we might be doing 3 high-level interval sessions, 1 recovery session, and potentially a race or something similar. Yep. Yep.
Really looking to train for a race or a much group fit. Do any of these numbers mean anything to me? And if there's one in particular I should be thinking about, which one would it be?
So I'll as a 50-something, well, I'm nearly at 50. I've got a few more years, but not far off it. And there's a few of us around here that, you know, this man over here talking to us in you know, competes at a pretty bloody high level at that sort of age. You know, we try and look at a myriad of things. You know, we train for enjoyment, we train for fitness, and I think that's crucial. But I think the problem is if you're just constantly chasing one value and you're not putting mix in, you know, it's like me saying to you, what's your favourite dinner? And giving it to you every single week of the year, every single Sunday you're having roast beef. Well, after a while, you know, Sunday lunch might be the thing to look forward to. But after 6 months of roast beef on a Sunday lunch, you're going to want to change, aren't you? No different with training. Okay, so it's about keeping things mixed up. It's about keeping different objectives going and doing different things for your training, as opposed to just constantly doing the same thing. So then, coming back to your next question, which is there an objective marker? Well, yes, your FTP is an objective marker of how your fitness is changing, but I personally don't use that to determine what your strengths and weaknesses are to set up the most effective training program for you. So what you're asking me is a twist on a similar picture. So I'm still a great believer in using heart rate and power for training rather than power exclusively. So for the majority of my athletes, I predominantly will use the heart rate training zones, and I can see over years that the heart rate zones often don't shift very dramatically, but we can see the power of those heart rate zones shift quite significantly. Now the difficulty is, there are, and again, I've got an hour and a half, 2 hour presentation here about the strengths of using heart rate, the strengths of using power, the weaknesses of using both. There are inherent problems with using heart rate in the same way there are inherent problems with using power. But for me, power is too stagnant and too static. And too many people will say, well, I did an FTP test 6 weeks ago, and that's what my FTP was, so therefore I'm going to base my training on this. Well, after 6 weeks, your fitness could have changed dramatically up or down. So if you're using those values from 6 weeks ago, you're now not training hard enough if your fitness has gone up. If your fitness has gone down, you're now training too hard. Whereas your heart rate zones, unless you've had a proper layoff, your heart rate zones, certainly an endurance level, won't have changed significantly. So you're actually looking to say, for a given heart rate, what's my power? For a given heart rate, and then the FTP test is then saying, oh look, my fitness is progressing, as opposed to using the FTP to determine your training zones. And I think that's where, you've been sold the Thomas Cook picture of what Benidorm Beach looks like, okay? You've been sold this beautiful dream of, if you know your FTP, you can set up all of your training. I don't believe that. I think you've been sold a bit of a dummy with that one. It's great, it's a good objective marker of your fitness changing in the right direction, but it doesn't tell us all the highs and lows and where your fitness, your strengths and weaknesses that we need to direct to undertake a fitness training. Okay?
Gary, thank you very much.
No problems at all.
Any more questions? Gary will
I'm going to go
be
hide in the corner, and if anyone wants to come and have a pedal and put a face mask on, and we can just, I'm not going to do a full test, but we can just have a look at how oxygen uptake changes and things like that and give you some understandings. Cheers guys, thank you.